The stars outside the viewport looked cold and distant as the Terran defense force vessel Starbound moved slowly toward the neutral station. Commander Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge with his hands behind his back, watching the alien ships gather around the station like flies around a light. There were dozens of them, all belonging to the Cathari Dominion, and every single one was armed to the teeth. Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos walked up beside him. She was a young officer, barely 30 years old, but she had proven herself many times in difficult situations. Her dark eyes studied the alien vessels with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the station," she said. "The Cathari delegation is ready to begin the summit." Hayes nodded slowly. He had been preparing for this moment for months. The Cathari Dominion was the largest empire in this part of the galaxy. They had conquered over 200 species in the past 3 centuries. Their military was feared across dozens of star systems. And now they wanted to talk to humanity. The question was why. "Tell them we are on our way," Hayes replied, "and have Sergeant Major Kevin Brooks meet me in the briefing room in 20 minutes. Maria raised an eyebrow but did not question the order. She simply nodded and turned to relay the message. Hayes took one last look at the alien ships before leaving the bridge. He had read every intelligence report about the Cathari. He knew their history, their culture, and most importantly, their military traditions. The Cathari respected only one thing: strength. If you showed weakness, they would crush you. If you showed strength, they might consider you worthy of respect. The briefing room was a small space near the center of the ship. A long table sat in the middle, surrounded by comfortable chairs. Hayes was already seated when Kevin Brooks walked through the door. Brooks was an older man, somewhere in his early 50s, with gray hair cut short and a face that had seen too many battles. He had served in the Terran Defense Force for over 30 years. His hands were rough and calloused from decades of holding weapons. But his eyes were calm and steady, like a man who had made peace with death a long time ago. "You wanted to see me, Commander?" Brooks asked as he took a seat across from Hayes. "I did. Tell me about your squad." Brooks leaned back in his chair. "Good soldiers, all of them. Corporal Amy Lynn has been with me for 2 years. Solid shooter. Keeps her head under pressure. Private First Class Derek Simmons works in the motor pool mostly, but he qualified expert on the range last month. Specialist Nicole Grant handles communications, but she grew up hunting with her father back on Earth. And Private Marcus Webb is fresh out of basic training. Only been with us for 6 months." Hayes listened carefully. "None of them are designated snipers?" "No, sir. We have actual snipers on board if you need them. My squad is just regular infantry and support personnel." Hayes smiled slightly. "That is exactly what I need." Brooks frowned, clearly confused. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Granted. What exactly are we walking into here?" "The Cathari do not invite species to diplomatic summits unless they want something. And they usually take what they want by force." Hayes stood up and walked to the small viewport in the briefing room. The neutral station was visible now, a massive structure of metal and glass that floated in the empty space between stars. Dozens of ships surrounded it, most of them Cathari warships. "The Cathari have a tradition," Hayes said slowly. "Before any negotiation, they demand a demonstration of military strength. They want to see what we are capable of before they decide how to treat us. And you want my squad to be that demonstration? I want your squad to remind the Cathari why humanity has never been conquered." Brooks was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "What kind of demonstration are we talking about?" Hayes turned to face him. "The Cathari have legendary snipers called shadow marks. They are trained from birth to shoot with perfect accuracy. Every species they have conquered has fallen to these shadow marks first. The officers, the leaders, anyone important gets a bullet through the skull from a kilometer away. I have heard of them, Brooks said. Supposed to be the best marksmen in the galaxy. They believe they are. And they want to test our best against theirs. Brooks understood now. You want to show them that our best is not just one person. You want to show them that every human can shoot like their shadow marks. Hayes smiled. Exactly. The Kethari think that elite warriors are rare. They train a handful of specialists over decades to create their perfect killers. They do not understand humans at all. What do you mean? I mean that every human who joins our military learns to shoot. Every single one. Basic training requires accuracy at distances that would make their shadow marks sweat. We do not create special snipers because we do not need to. Every soldier is a marksman. Every cook, every mechanic, every communications officer. They can all put a bullet exactly where it needs to go. Brooks chuckled softly. You want to scare them. I want to educate them. The Kethari have never faced a species like us. They conquer worlds by taking out the leaders, by killing the best warriors, and then watching the rest surrender. That does not work against humans. Because there is no head to cut off, Brooks finished. Every soldier is the head. Now you understand. Hayes walked back to the table and placed his hands flat on the surface. I need your squad ready in 2 hours. Full combat gear, standard rifles. Nothing fancy. Nothing special. Just 5 ordinary soldiers doing what every human soldier can do. Brooks stood up and saluted. We will be ready, Commander. But I have one question. Go ahead. What if their shadow marks are actually better than us? What if they win this contest? Hayes met his eyes with a cold, steady gaze. They will not. Because the Kethari have spent centuries training a small number of elite killers. Humanity has spent 10,000 years turning every single person into a potential threat. They have specialists. We have a species of shooters. There is no contest here, Sergeant Major. There is only a lesson that the Kethari are about to learn. Brooks smiled, the expression making his weathered face look younger for a moment. Understood, sir. We will teach them well. He saluted again and left the briefing room. Hayes watched him go, then turned back to the viewport. The neutral station loomed larger now as the Starbound approached. Somewhere on that station, Kethari diplomats were waiting. Confident in their military superiority, certain that no species could match their legendary shadow marks. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The neutral station was even larger on the inside than it appeared from space. Commander Daniel Hayes walked through the wide corridors with Maria Santos at his side, and Sergeant Major Kevin Brooks leading his squad behind them. The walls were made of some kind of white metal that reflected the soft blue lights overhead. Everything felt clean and sterile, like a hospital made for giants. Kethari guards stood at every intersection. They were tall creatures, almost 8 feet in height, with 4 arms and skin the color of old copper. Their faces were long and narrow, with large compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Each guard held a crystalline rifle that hummed with quiet energy. Hayes kept his expression calm as they walked. He had studied the Kethari for months. He knew their body language, their customs, their beliefs. He knew that they valued strength above everything else. Showing fear would be the worst thing he could do right now. The delegation arrived at a massive chamber that had been converted into some kind of arena. The ceiling rose 50 meters overhead, and the floor was covered with smooth gray tiles. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing targeting systems and distance markers. At the far end of the chamber, a group of Kethari waited. High Ambassador Kethver stood at the center of the group. He was older than the others. His copper skin faded to a dull bronze with age. His forearms were folded across his chest in a gesture that Hayes recognized as confidence. Behind him stood 3 warriors wearing black armor marked with silver scars. These were the Shadow Marks, the legendary snipers of the Cathari Dominion. "Welcome, Commander Hayes," Cathver said. His voice came through a translation device embedded in his throat, turning alien sounds into English words. "We are pleased that humanity has accepted our invitation." Hayes stopped a few meters from the ambassador and gave a slight bow. "Thank you for having us. We are honored to participate in this summit." Cathver made a clicking sound that the translator did not interpret. Hayes knew from his studies that this was a sound of amusement, as if the ambassador found something funny about the situation. "Before we begin our negotiations," Cathver continued, "there is the matter of tradition to address. The Cathari Dominion does not negotiate with weak species. We must first see proof of your military strength." "We expected as much," Hayes replied. "What kind of demonstration did you have in mind?" The ambassador gestured toward the 3 shadow marks behind him. "These are the finest marksmen in our empire. They have killed more enemies than they can count. We propose a simple contest of skill, moving targets at increasing distances. The shooter who misses first is eliminated. The species with the last shooter standing proves their superiority." Maria leaned close to Hayes and whispered, "Sir, this is a trap. They have been training these snipers for decades. They know they will win." Hayes did not look at her. He kept his eyes fixed on Cathver. "And what are the stakes of this contest?" The ambassador's compound eyes seemed to gleam with anticipation. "If your sniper loses, humanity accepts provisional status within the Dominion. You will be protected, but you will answer to us. Your species will serve the greater glory of the Cathari people. And if we win, then we negotiate as equals. Your species will be recognized as worthy allies rather than subjects." The weight of the decision pressed down on Hayes like a physical force. The entire future of humanity was about to be decided by a shooting contest. If they lost, humanity would become servants of an alien empire. If they won, they would earn respect and freedom. He thought about the 800 million soldiers currently serving in the Terran Defense Force. He thought about the billions of civilians back on Earth and the colony worlds. He thought about his own family, his daughter who was just starting school, his wife who was waiting for him to come home safe. Then he thought about what made humans special. Not strength, not speed, not technology. Something simpler than all of that. Something that the Cathari had never encountered before. "We accept your challenge," Hayes said. Cathver made that clicking sound again. "Excellent. Now, which of your warriors is your sniper? Which one will face our shadow marks?" Hayes turned to look at his squad. Brooks stood at attention with his 4 soldiers lined up beside him. Corporal Amy Lynn, a logistics specialist. Private First Class Derek Simmons, a mechanic from the motor pool. Specialist Nicole Grant, a communications expert. Private Marcus Webb, a fresh recruit barely out of basic training. None of them were designated snipers. None of them were specialists. They were just soldiers. Ordinary, everyday soldiers. Hayes turned back to the ambassador with a small smile on his face. "I have a question first. Which of your 3 shadow marks is the best?" Cathver pointed to the tallest of the 3 warriors, a scarred veteran whose crystalline rifle seemed to pulse with inner light. "Shadowmark Prime Vethkor. He has 9,000 confirmed kills across 40 campaigns. He has never missed a shot in his entire career." Hayes nodded as if this information was very interesting. "Impressive. And you want to know which of my soldiers is our sniper?" "Yes. Bring forward your champion." The commander looked at his squad one more time. Brooks met his eyes with calm understanding. Amy Lynn stood perfectly still, her face showing no emotion. Derek Simmons looked almost bored. Nicole Grant had a slight smile on her lips. Marcus Webb, the youngest of them all, simply waited for orders. Hayes turned back to Kethfor. The smile on his face grew wider. "Pick anyone," he said. They all hit perfectly. The chamber went completely silent. The clicking sounds from the Cathari delegation stopped. Even the hum of the holographic displays seemed to fade away. Kethfor stared at Hayes as if he had spoken in a language the translator could not understand. "I do not understand. You must have a designated sniper, a specialist, someone trained specifically for this purpose." "We do not," Hayes replied simply. "Every soldier in my squad can shoot with equal accuracy. Every soldier on my ship can do the same. Every soldier in the entire Terran Defense Force has been trained to hit targets at extreme distances. There is no need for specialists when everyone is already at that level." One of the Kethari advisors leaned close to the ambassador and spoke in rapid, clicking sounds. The translator picked up fragments of the conversation. Impossible. Lying. Deception. Kethfor raised one of his 4 hands to silence his advisor. His compound eyes were fixed on Hayes with new intensity, studying the human commander as if seeing him for the first time. "You claim that all your soldiers are snipers?" "I claim that all my soldiers can shoot," Hayes corrected. "Whether you call them snipers or not is your decision. But if you want to test our skills, you can start with anyone in that line. The result will be the same." The ambassador was quiet for a long moment. Then he gestured toward the arena floor. "Very well, Commander Hayes. Let us see if your claims are true. Prepare your soldiers. The contest will begin in 10 minutes. Hayes nodded and turned to Brooks. "Sergeant Major, get your people ready. Standard procedures. Nothing fancy. Just do what you have always done." Brooks saluted with a grin on his weathered face. "Yes, sir." They will not know what hit them. As the squad moved to prepare their weapons, Hayes looked up at the holographic displays showing the targeting systems. The first round would be at 500 meters. Child's play for any trained human soldier. The Cathari had no idea what they had gotten themselves into. The arena fell silent as the first round began. Holographic targets appeared at the far end of the chamber, glowing blue circles that moved slowly from side to side. The distance markers showed 500 meters. For a sniper, this was an easy shot. For anyone else, it would be nearly impossible. The 3 shadow marks stepped up to the firing line. Their crystalline rifles sang with a harmonic tone as they raised them to their shoulders. Each warrior moved with practiced precision, their 4 arms working together in perfect coordination. One arm held the front of the weapon, one supported the stock, one worked the trigger, and one adjusted the sights. They fired simultaneously. 3 beams of light cut through the air, and 3 targets shattered into pieces. The Cathari delegation made clicking sounds of approval. Kethfor turned to Hayes, with what might have been a smile on his alien face. "Your turn, Commander. Send your sniper." Hayes nodded to Brooks, who gestured to Private Marcus Webb. The young soldier stepped forward, his simple projectile rifle looking crude compared to the elegant Cathari weapons. Webb was 22 years old with less than a year of real service. He had spent most of his time in training exercises and basic duties. The Cathari watched him with obvious amusement. Some of them made clicking sounds that needed no translation. They were laughing at this young, inexperienced soldier who dared to challenge their legendary shadow marks. Webb did not seem to notice. He raised his rifle to his shoulder, took a slow breath, and squeezed the trigger. The crack of the gunshot echoed through the chamber. The target exploded. The clicking sound stopped. Webb lowered his rifle and stepped back without a word. His face showed no pride, no celebration. He had simply done what he was trained to do. The second round moved the targets to 1,000 meters. The shadow marks fired again, and again their shots hit perfectly. Corporal Amy Lin stepped up to the firing line. She was a logistics specialist who spent most of her days managing supply chains and inventory. Her rifle was borrowed from the ship's armory. She fired once. The target shattered. The third round was at 1,500 meters. This was where things got difficult. At this distance, the curvature of the station's artificial gravity began to affect the shots. The air recyclers created tiny currents that could push a bullet off course. The shadow marks took longer to aim. Adjusting their weapons with careful precision, all three hit their targets. Specialist Nicole Grant walked to the firing line. She handled communications for the squad, spending most of her time managing radio frequencies and encoding messages. She had qualified on the rifle range 6 months ago during a routine training exercise. She raised her weapon, paused for a moment to judge the distance, and fired. The target exploded. Kethfer's 4 arms had fallen to his sides. His compound eyes kept moving from the human shooters to their destroyed targets, as if he could not believe what he was seeing. "This is some kind of trick," one of his advisors hissed. "They must be using advanced targeting systems. Hidden computers. Something." Hayes overheard the comment and shook his head. "No tricks. No computers. Just skill." The fourth round pushed the distance to 2,000 meters. 2 full kilometers of open space between the shooter and the target. At this range, a bullet would take almost 2 seconds to reach its destination. The target would move considerably during that time. The shooter had to predict where it would be, not where it was. The shadow marks aimed carefully. 2 of them hit their targets. The third shot went wide by a few centimeters. The Kethari delegation went completely silent. One of their legendary snipers had missed. After centuries of perfect accuracy, a shadow mark had failed to hit a target. Private First Class Derek Simmons walked to the firing line. He worked in the motor pool, spending his days maintaining vehicles and repairing engines. His hands were stained with grease more often than they held a rifle. He aimed, breathed out slowly, and fired. The target shattered. The remaining 2 shadow marks exchanged glances. Something passed between them, a silent communication that Hayes could not interpret. They seemed uncertain for the first time. The 5th round was at 2,500 meters. Even the elite shadow marks were struggling now. Their crystalline rifles hummed with increasing intensity as they adjusted their sights, calculating distance and movement with desperate precision. One of them hit the target. The other missed by a wide margin. Sergeant Major Kevin Brooks finally stepped up to take his turn. He was the oldest human in the arena, with 30 years of military service behind him. His rifle was the same standard issue weapon that all the others used. Nothing special. Nothing modified. He fired without hesitation. The target exploded. Brooks stepped back and looked at Hayes with a slight nod. The message was clear. This was exactly what they had trained for. This was what every human soldier could do. The 6th round was at 3,000 meters. 3 full kilometers. The lone remaining shadow mark, the legendary Vethkur himself, stood at the firing line. His 9,000 kills meant nothing now. His lifetime of training came down to this single shot. He took a full minute to aim. His crystalline rifle glowed with inner light as he made microscopic adjustments. Finally, he fired. The shot hit the edge of the target. It counted, but barely. Maria Santos walked to the firing line. She was the ship's second in command, an officer who spent most of her time on the bridge managing schedules and coordinating with other vessels. She had not fired a rifle in combat in over 5 years. She raised her weapon, took aim, and fired. The shot struck dead center. Vethkur stared at her with something that might have been horror. This was not possible. This could not be happening. A random officer from a random ship had just outshot the greatest marksman in the Kethari Dominion. The 7th round was at 3,500 meters. Vethkur missed. The arena fell into complete silence. The greatest sniper in the history of the HFY Dominion had failed, and the humans had not missed a single shot. Hayes walked slowly to the center of the arena. He looked at HFY, then at the defeated Shadowmarks, then at his own soldiers standing calmly with their simple weapons. "Do you understand now?" he asked quietly. "We did not bring our best shooter. We did not bring specialists. We brought ordinary soldiers, logistics personnel, mechanics, communications experts, fresh recruits. And every single one of them can do what your Shadowmarks cannot." HFY's voice was barely a whisper. "How is this possible?" Hayes smiled. "Because we are human, and this is what humans do." The ambassador looked at the human squad, then at his own defeated warriors. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, the HFY Dominion had met a species they could not intimidate, and they were terrified. The arena remained silent for a long time after the contest ended. The holographic displays had gone dark. The targeting systems had powered down. All that remained were 2 groups standing on opposite sides of the chamber, the victorious humans and the defeated HFY. High Ambassador HFY had not moved since the final shot. His forearms hung loosely at his sides, and his compound eyes stared at the human soldiers with an expression that was difficult to read. Behind him, the 3 Shadowmarks stood in shame. Their legendary status had been destroyed in less than an hour. Finally, HFY spoke. His voice was quiet, almost gentle, completely different from the confident tone he had used at the start of the demonstration. "Commander Hayes, I must understand something. We have conquered over 200 species across this galaxy. We have faced warriors of every kind imaginable. Some were strong, some were fast, some had technology beyond our own. But we always won because our Shadowmarks could eliminate their leaders, their best fighters, their champions. Without a head, the body dies. This has been our strategy for 3 centuries. He paused, his compound eyes moving across each member of the human squad. "But you have no head to cut off. You have no champions. Your leaders are not protected by a small group of elite warriors because every soldier is already at that level. How did your species develop this way?" Hayes walked slowly toward the ambassador. His boots echoed on the metal floor with each step. When he spoke, his voice was calm and measured. "You want to know the truth about humans? Let me tell you a story. 10,000 years ago, my ancestors lived in caves. They hunted animals with sharpened sticks. They had no technology, no civilization, nothing that would suggest they would ever amount to anything." He stopped a few meters from HFY and clasped his hands behind his back. But they had one thing that made them special. They could throw objects with incredible accuracy. A rock, a spear, a stick. Whatever they could pick up, they could throw it and hit what they aimed at. Other predators on our world used claws and teeth. My ancestors used rocks thrown from a distance. HFY listened without interrupting. The other HFY had moved closer, drawn by the story. "As centuries passed, we got better at it," Hayes continued. "We invented the bow and arrow, a wooden stick with a string that could send a pointed shaft flying through the air. Then came the crossbow, which was even more powerful. Then the musket, which used explosives to push metal balls at incredible speeds. Then the rifle, which could hit targets from distances that our ancestors could never have imagined." He gestured to the weapons held by his soldiers. Each invention was designed to do one thing: kill from farther away. The species that mastered this skill survived. The species that did not became prey. My ancestors became very, very good at killing things from a distance because it was the only way to stay alive. HFY made a soft clicking sound. "Many species have developed ranged weapons. This does not explain your universal accuracy." "You are right," Hayes agreed. Weapons alone do not explain it. What explains it is what we did to each other. The ambassador tilted his head in confusion. For most of our history, Hayes said, the greatest threat to any human was not an animal or a natural disaster. It was other humans. We spent thousands of years fighting each other. War after war after war. Millions of people died in conflicts over land, resources, religion, politics, and sometimes for no reason at all. We got very good at killing each other because we had to. He let that statement hang in the air for a moment before continuing. When you fight the same enemy for 10,000 years, you learn everything about them. You learn how they think, how they move, how they attack. You develop weapons specifically designed to kill them. You train every member of your society to fight because you never know when the enemy might attack. Hayes pointed to his soldiers. These are not specialists because we cannot afford specialists. When war can come from any direction at any time, everyone needs to be ready. Every farmer, every builder, every cook, every child old enough to hold a weapon. Our survival as a species depended on universal military skill. Kethfer was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thoughtful. You are saying that your species became deadly because you spent millennia killing each other. Yes, we refined the art of killing until it became a science. We tested every weapon, every technique, every strategy in real combat against opponents who were just as smart and just as motivated as we were. The methods that worked survived. The methods that failed were abandoned. After 10,000 years of this brutal testing, what remains is a species that can put a projectile exactly where it needs to go. One of the Kethari advisors stepped forward. But surely, your average soldier is not as skilled as your elite forces. There must be some variation. Hayes smiled slightly. There is variation, yes. Some humans are better shooters than others. But our baseline, our minimum acceptable level of skill, is what you just witnessed. Every soldier in my squad passed basic training. Basic training requires accuracy at distances your shadow marks consider exceptional. If they could not shoot at that level, they would not be soldiers. He turned to look at his squad. Brooks stood at attention with his weathered face showing no emotion. Amy Lynn, the logistics specialist, waited calmly with her borrowed rifle. Derek Simmons, the mechanic, looked almost bored. Nicole Grant, the communications expert, had a slight smile on her face. Marcus Webb, the youngest of them all, simply stood ready for whatever came next. These are ordinary soldiers, Hayes said. Not the best. Not the worst. Just average. And they defeated the finest marksman your empire has ever produced. Kethfer looked at his own shadow marks. Vethkar, the legendary warrior with 9,000 kills, could not meet his ambassador's eyes. His shame was obvious in the way his four shoulders slumped forward. We trained our shadow marks from infancy, Kethfer said quietly. They dedicate their entire lives to mastering their craft. Decades of practice. Thousands of hours of training. And you are telling me that your average soldier can match them after a few months of basic instruction? Not match them, Hayes corrected. Exceed them. Because our basic instruction is built on 10,000 years of accumulated knowledge. Every technique, every method, every trick that humans have ever discovered is passed down to the next generation. Our recruits do not start from zero. They start from where the previous generation ended. The ambassador was silent for a long time. The implications of what Hayes was saying seemed to wash over him like a wave. Finally, Kethfer spoke. Commander Hayes, how many soldiers serve in your military forces? Across all branches? Approximately 800 million active duty personnel. The clicking sound that followed was not amusement. It was something closer to fear. 800 million soldiers, Kethfer repeated. All trained to the level we just witnessed? At minimum. Many are better. The ambassador's forearms wrapped around his body in a gesture that Hayes did not recognize. It took him a moment to realize that the Kethari leader was hugging himself, as if trying to hold together a worldview that had just shattered. "We have made a terrible miscalculation," Kethver said quietly. "We thought you were just another species to be conquered. We were wrong." Hayes nodded slowly. "Yes, you were." The negotiations that followed the contest were unlike anything the Kethari had ever experienced. For 3 centuries, they had approached every diplomatic meeting from a position of absolute power. They made demands. Other species obeyed. That was how the universe worked out, but now they sat across from humans as equals. Not because humanity had more ships or better technology. Not because humanity had threatened them with destruction. Simply because the Kethari finally understood what they were dealing with. Commander Daniel Hayes sat at the main negotiating table with Maria Santos and Kevin Brooks beside him. High Ambassador Kethver sat across from them with his advisors flanking his position. The tension that had filled the chamber during the contest had been replaced by something different. Careful respect. "We propose a mutual defense treaty," Kethver said. His tone was polite, almost humble. "The Kethari Dominion will recognize human space as sovereign territory. We will not expand into your systems, and you will not expand into ours. If either of our peoples is attacked by an outside force, the other will provide military assistance." Hayes considered the offer. It was far better than what the Kethari usually gave to other species. Most of them ended up as servants or slaves, their planet stripped of resources to fuel the Dominion's endless expansion. "We find these terms acceptable," Hayes replied. "But we have one additional condition." Kethver's compound eyes narrowed slightly. "Name it." "All species currently under Kethari protection will be given the option to leave. If they wish to join a coalition with humanity, you will not interfere." The ambassador was quiet for a moment. The condition was significant. The Kethari had conquered hundreds of worlds, and their labor force depended on those conquered peoples. Letting them leave would weaken the Dominion considerably, but Kethver remembered the contest. He remembered watching ordinary human soldiers defeat his greatest warriors with casual ease. He thought about what would happen if humanity decided to liberate those conquered worlds by force. "Agreed," he said finally. "We will not interfere with their choice." Hayes nodded. "Then we have a deal." After the formal documents were signed, Kethver requested a tour of the Starbound before departing. Hayes granted the request, curious about what the ambassador hoped to learn. They walked through the ship's corridors together, passing crews performing their daily duties. Engineers adjusted power systems. Technicians monitored computer displays. Cooks prepared meals in the galley. Cleaning staff swept the floors. Just ordinary people doing ordinary jobs. But Kethver noticed something. Every single person they passed moved with a certain awareness. Their eyes tracked movement. Their bodies stayed balanced and ready. Even the cook stirring a pot of soup held himself like a soldier expecting an ambush. "Your people are always alert," Kethver observed. "Old habits," Hayes replied. "When you spend 10,000 years fighting, you never really relax. The threat might be gone, but the instincts remain." They reached the recreation area, a large space where off-duty personnel could relax and enjoy various activities. Several people were playing games. Others were reading or talking. And in one corner, a group of crew members were practicing at a small shooting range. Kethver watched a young inside, barely out of the academy, fire 3 rounds in quick succession. All 3 went through the same hole at 50 meters. "May I ask how often your soldiers train with their weapons?" The ambassador inquired. "Officially?" "Quarterly qualifications. Every soldier has to prove they can still shoot accurately 4 times per year." "And unofficially?" Hayes gestured to the shooting range. Whenever they have free time, most of them find it relaxing. Something about the focus required helps clear the mind. Chansworth's translator actually struggled to process this information. The concept of killing practice as a leisure activity was completely foreign to his understanding of the universe. You find comfort in preparing for violence? We find comfort in being prepared, Hayes corrected. There is a difference. A soldier who practices is a soldier who survives. A soldier who survives comes home to their family. We practice because we want to live, not because we want to kill. The ambassador nodded slowly, though Hayes was not sure he truly understood. Later, as the Kethari shuttle prepared to depart, Kethver stopped at the airlock. His military advisors had spent the past hours in quiet discussion, reconsidering centuries of strategic doctrine. Everything they had believed about warfare was being questioned. Commander Hayes, I must ask one final question before I leave. Go ahead. In your demonstration today, you used 5 soldiers and 1 officer. 6 individuals. You claimed they represented your baseline, your minimum acceptable standard. Is this truly the case? It is. Kethver's compound eyes seemed to dim, as if something had gone out of them. Then I must ask, how many humans could we expect to face if we ever became enemies? Hayes considered the question carefully before answering. The Terran Defense Force currently has 800 million active duty personnel. But that is just the professional military. In times of crisis, we can call upon reservists, veterans, and civilian volunteers. During our last major conflict, we mobilized nearly 5 billion soldiers. 5 billion, Kethver repeated. All trained to the standard we witness today? All trained, yes. The ambassador was silent for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something that Hayes had never expected to hear from a Kethari leader. Commander, the Dominion has spent 3 centuries conquering species across this galaxy. We believed ourselves to be the apex predators of the universe. We believed our shadow marks represented the peak of ranged warfare. We believed that no species could ever challenge our dominance. He paused, his forearms folding across his chest. We were wrong. We were so completely wrong that I'm embarrassed by our arrogance. Your species has achieved something we never thought possible. You have made every individual into a warrior without sacrificing their ability to be farmers, builders, artists, or scholars. You have weaponized your entire population while still maintaining a functioning civilization. Hayes nodded slowly. We did not have a choice. Our world forced us to adapt or die. We adapted. And in doing so, you became something that my people should have feared from the first moment we detected your transmissions. Kethver made a gesture that Hayes recognized as deep respect. I will return to the Dominion and explain what I have learned. Our people will need time to adjust their understanding of the universe. But I believe this is the beginning of a new era. An era of what? An era of mutual respect. An era where the Kethari Dominion no longer sees conquest as its only option. An era where we must learn to coexist with a species that could destroy us if we ever gave them a reason to. Hayes extended his hand, and after a moment of hesitation, Kethver reached out with one of his 4 arms to shake it. That is all we ever wanted, Hayes said. Peace and respect. Nothing more. As the shuttle departed, Maria Santos joined her commander at the observation window. The Kethari vessel shrank into the distance, carrying news that would change the balance of power across the galaxy. Sir, do you think they will really treat us as equals? Maria asked. Hayes watched the shuttle until it disappeared among the stars. They will now, because they understand that when they look at any human, they might be looking at the person who could kill them from 5 kilometers away. That kind of knowledge encourages politeness. Maria smiled slightly. the greatest diplomatic tool in human history. The simple fact that any of us could be the sniper, and all of us can hit perfectly. The Starbound turned toward home, its engines humming with quiet power. Behind them, the neutral station grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among millions. Commander Hayes thought about what waited for him back on Earth. His wife, his daughter, his home. Simple things that made life worth living. Simple things that humans had always fought to protect. The Cathari had learned an important lesson today. Humans were not special because they had champions or elite warriors. Humans were special because every single one of them was dangerous. The cook in the galley, the engineer fixing the engines, the ensign fresh out of training. Any one of them could pick up a rifle and hit a target from distances that made other species. That was the truth about humanity. That was the secret the Cathari had finally discovered. And that was why the galaxy would never be the same.